I heard it.
Yep, it's going.
We're on.
See how it goes. How cool that we have. Remember all the video cameras you'd have to carry around, bigger
Yeah.
and bigger, and they just keep getting smaller. And now you got a phone.
Takes a better picture.
And it takes a better picture than all that crap that we had, huh?
Yeah.
That you had. So we married in '63. When did you guys get sealed in the temple?
Year after that.
64?
No, 65.
65.
No.
2 years after that?
October 16th, 1965.
It was a year after I was made an elder. Is what it was.
So you weren't, were you members of the church when you got married?
She got married when I was right after I got out of boot camp. We used to hitchhike home every weekend before I went overseas. And
I wasn't a member because we were married in the Lutheran church.
But you got baptized just before I went overseas.
Let's back up to that one real quick then.
Yeah.
So where did you get married? What physical location?
In
Lutheran Church on S Street, I think.
In Sacramento?
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's St. John's
Do you remember who married you?
Lutheran Church.
Yes.
Reverend Romias.
Reverend Romias. So before you got married, did you have to meet with him and
Yes.
have a
We had
marriage
a-
conversation with them?
Yeah, and he talked to us
I
about
don't remember that.
what we wanted in our life and stuff, and I said then we wanted a one religion family,
Yeah.
and he asked us about how we felt about Jesus Christ, and he asked Rick what his
I don't remember.
what he wanted for his future.
When I was in boot camp, I did look into being a Lutheran. They didn't really have any interest in me at all,
So what did your parents say when you guys got engaged?
so you don't want to know what my mother said.
I do.
You
And
wanna
so
know?
does everybody that's going to watch this video.
His mother was
Well, let's hear about what your mother said first. Your mother and
well
father.
before. Let's go way back when I first dated him. And on our third date, I came in the house and I was talking about how wonderful the date was and whatever. And Rick had come that night to get me, and the car was broken down, so my dad went out to work on it right after Rick came in the house to get me for my date. And instead of doing anything, Rick went out and helped my father with the car. And took off his coat, rolled up his sleeves, and got greasy right there with my dad, but he fixed my dad's car. And he came in, this is the night we went out, and he came in and he cleaned himself up, and then we left for the date. And then I came home from the date that night telling my parents what a happy time I had had and everything. And my dad said, I don't think I'd let this boy go, Sharon, if I were you.
So then you got engaged sometime later, and what was the reaction
months
to
later.
being engaged?
Oh, that's what's so funny about my life. It's always like God is right there with me. I got engaged. I'm 17 years old. I'll be 18 in May, but I'm still 17. And he gives me this ring out in the car, and I tell him yes. And I go home and I take my ring and show my parents, and my dad said, about time. And my mother said, he is such a good boy.
But you didn't get married for a couple more years after that.
And they asked me on that night what my plans were. And I said, oh, Dad, he's got a lot of growing up yet to do. And he said, okay, fine. Then you're going to college? And I said, yes.
So the plan was to be engaged for a while, and everybody was okay with that in your family?
Yep.
Dad? So when you started dating Mom all the way up to when you got engaged, what was your parents?
I don't know. I don't recall any reaction from my family. I really don't.
Was Bill already married at this point?
Oh yeah, yeah. He
So
got married when he was a senior.
what did your family think about marriage in general? It was just like, whatever.
I don't know what they thought.
Got
I
it.
have no idea.
So then you got married, and they all came to the wedding. You had a wedding ceremony
No.
with rice being thrown, and what was the ceremony like?
We had planned our wedding, and we had told his family about the date. I told his mother. And the day before our wedding, 2 days before our wedding, she decided to go in the hospital and have elective surgery done. And when I went to visit her in the hospital, she told me that I was nothing but a slut, and that I'd stolen her son from her.
So your mom wasn't a big fan of Mom then, huh?
Not at that time. I think prior to that,
Everything was.
all the way through high school and pretty much into college, I think she was all right with it.
But his mother really suffered with depression and other things. And Rick really was the helper in the house. I mean, he did everything for everybody, and I can understand how this was threatening to her.
Yeah.
So,
Taking away somebody
yeah,
that's
because,
been a
you know,
rock.
even as a loving woman who loves my sons, even for me to let them go to be married was hard for me.
Yeah.
So I can understand that from her.
I don't remember my dad going to the wedding, did he?
I
No.
just don't remember, darling.
I don't
So who came
remember.
to the wedding? Was it friends, family? Was it
Oh, yeah,
small,
friends.
big?
Well, his
Did you have-
sister was one of my bridesmaids. My sister and her were the two bridesmaids. And his brother was his best man. But I just don't remember about the mom and dad.
But you got married in the Lutheran church, and then
Yes.
did you have a little gathering afterwards, or what? It was just a ceremony and you drove
No,
off?
we took
No,
our
we
stuff
had a
and went.
reception
Huh?
afterward,
At
yes.
the place, that's right,
Yes,
we did.
and we had a lot of guests. We sent out 350 wedding invitations, and we had cake and punch and whatever. And I remember paying for that. I paid for that. And
This was in 1963, so you would have mailed invitation. What was the traditions back then?
I
Of,
mailed all the
wedding,
invitations. Yeah, I made them out and I mailed them all.
Oh.
My mother helped me.
I don't think we have any of those, do we?
We have
We
one
might
put
somewhere,
somewhere.
I don't know.
got it. And so then after the night of the wedding, obviously you got sick. Dad was saying the next night. So what did you do the evening of your wedding? You went.
This is what we did. That's when I got
You
sick.
don't need to know.
Yeah, I don't need that part, Dad.
I
Well, I'm
thought-
just wondering where you went.
That's
And
not even what happened.
were you moving?
I
Did you
know
move
it.
into a house together that
Moved
night?
into an apartment.
Uh huh.
The
That was on S Street?
apartment.
Yeah, Dad had some plans for us, things we were going to do, but I was so sick by the time I got back. I had asked my family, my mom and dad and sister and brother, and my grandparents, whoever was alive that I can't remember, to come to our apartment to open a few packages.
Got it.
And so they stayed till about 9 o'clock that night while we were opening a few things.
Your gifts from the wedding?
Yes, but as it progressed, as this is going on, the flu is beginning to catch up back with me and I'm really sick. So by the time I got to bed, getting my wedding dress on, all I can remember is being sick.
Got
Well,
it.
that was a great blessing because that she got sick. Because the night before our wedding, my college friends threw a party and I got stone drunk.
So you were hungover on wedding day?
Well, I was late. But I had, the night before, I had crawled under a coffee table and raised up my head and had a big gash on my head. And I don't know, was I late to the wedding or was late picking you up or something?
But you got married in your
Dress blue.
your dress blue, so you had a hat on, right, covering your
Yeah.
big gash.
But I had a hat on right where they hit right where I gashed my head open. So,
Oh, that was not pleasant.
no.
And I
But
don't
that-
remember that part at all, except for being very upset about.
But she
Hold on
couldn't
one
stay-
second.
She couldn't stay upset too long.
I forgot that I had all my questions on my computer.
Couldn't be upset too long because she then got sick.
So it took you off the hook of being,
Well, getting married is a lot of work. I mean, just getting all the planning done and everything. And my mom didn't help with my wedding at all. I had to do it all myself.
Well, you probably wanted to.
I probably did.
So you got married in '63, sealed in '65.
Yeah.
And,
Rick went overseas for a year, remember?
Yeah.
Actually, 16 months.
Yes. So by the time that he got home, we were sealed shortly thereafter.
Gotcha.
And we had been active in church. I had been active in church that whole time.
Let's back up to that real quick. How you became members of the church. Now,
Yeah.
Dad, you were baptized as a young child into the church, the Mormon
12.
church.
12 years old. My bus driver, we had to spend about 40 minutes on our bus going to school. The bus driver was LDS and he basically baptized myself, my brother, and my sister.
Well, he got him into the scouting program, the bus driver.
Got it. So, but then there was a big gap of you didn't have much to do with church
Yeah.
soon after that.
It was about a year, a little less than a year, and then I was
You're off doing your
inactive
thing.
until she got baptized, basically.
So, Mom, tell us about how you came about getting baptized.
Well,
You were a Lutheran at the time.
While I was in boot camp, my brother was teaching her, and then she got the.
So your brother had stayed active, or
My brother had stayed active.
Got it.
Well,
So-
No, that's
he went
not
in. He
true.
went inactive, but then he had a bad legal issue, and he then got active after he had that legal issue.
Got it. So then he introduced you to the church, Mom, or started
yes,
talking to you
Dad
about
had
it.
gone back to Camp Pendleton, as it were, and he invited me to come over to hear the missionaries.
Got
Bill
it.
did. Bill and Johnny did. And so I went over to their house for dinner, and I had my first discussion with the missionaries. And that night, while having the first discussion with the missionaries, I had been prepared because I knew my Bible very well, and everything they said kind of just was like a companion to the Bible, questions I had had all my life. And so I said to them, I want to be baptized. This was after my first lesson, and sometime real soon. And they said, well, you have to have all 6 to 8 lessons, and I don't remember what it was. And I said, well, how about giving me 3 tonight and 3 on the next night we get together, and then I can get baptized real soon. So we actually did do that. I had 3 lessons that night. I met with them one more time, had 3 more lessons, and then a third time, and then we set my baptismal date for Saturday.
So I want to clarify this because some of us kids have different understandings of how you came to the church. So Bill is the one that introduced the missionaries to you. It wasn't
Yes.
missionaries knocking on your door.
Well, no, Rick had been, as I told you, he went to go to the Lutheran church.
While I was in boot camp, I ended up going to LDS services.
So what made you decide to do that? You hadn't been active forever.
Because everybody else in boot camp had to march to church. There was only 3 LDS guys there, and we could go over by ourselves.
Got it. So it was
But
nice.
he did go to the Lutheran church first, but they were not even nice to him, much less inviting to him. So he had told me that. I didn't know much more about anything going on with him, about going to the LDS church, but meanwhile, Bill had sort of stayed in tune with us, and he invited me over to meet the missionaries.
Have you always gotten along pretty well with Bill and Johnny since when you guys first got married or knew each
Yeah.
other?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The one thing that she did date a couple of LDS kids and went to a church service while she was in high school. So she had a little bit of a introduction to the
She's
church.
aware of it at least.
Yeah.
Got it. So you
She
got
was aware of it,
baptized.
wasn't aware of it.
Did you tell Dad you were getting baptized when you got baptized?
He either called me, I think he called me once a week. I can't remember how we talked, but he called me, and then I told him, I said, well, I want to be baptized, and this is what's funny, he said, into what church? And I said, in the Mormon church. He said, you're kidding me. Not really. Here's a guy totally inactive, you know.
Yeah.
And I said, yes, it's the answers to so many questions I've had all my life. And so I said, I want to be baptized on Saturday. And he said, okay, I'll be there. And he hitchhiked home for our baptism.
Had you guys ever talked about religion during your dating?
Yes,
Not a lot, though.
but not very much. He knew that I loved Christ. I mean, he's always known that. But, and he knew I loved my church. Being a Lutheran, I loved it. But again, I went to the church by myself. I went to the Baptist church by myself. The only time I would get to the Lutheran church is every time my mother might take me on a holiday. And then it was more about dressing up and wearing the proper hat and gloves and whatever. But I just loved the Lord, and I loved when someone would talk about him. It didn't matter whether it was a Baptist minister or Lutheran minister, and I loved the scriptures. And so I wanted to have a religion for my children. I had felt that long before I ever met Rick, that it was important that my children grow up and know about Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the timeline of it real quick. So this married in '63. You got baptized when, Mom? What do you remember? What year? This is when you're
January of
62.
62.
no
Yeah.
That would be before you got married.
No.
64 or 65. I
64,
don't know.
65.
That was 64.
64, because you got sealed in 65 then,
Yes.
right? So Dad, then you decide, oh, I better get I need to be active now? Because you're going to the
Well-
church while you're at boot camp.
Actually, and I went overseas and I never went to church.
Uh-huh.
She had gone down and gotten active in Ocean Carlsbad Ward. President Packard was a bishop. And she met with him, told him about me probably not being active, and he said, well, send this Sunday school manual to him and he can be the 17-year-old Sunday school teacher when he comes back. So I threw my cigarettes overboard and started reading, and that's when I got active.
Was that hard to do?
No,
You were just ready?
well, I didn't want to disappoint my wife.
Well, I want to tell a little more in between of that story. When I got baptized, I was living in Sacramento, California.
Yeah.
Rick was stationed at Camp Pendleton. I did not go down to Camp Pendleton right away to live down there. I was up there because he was going overseas.
Gotcha.
And so I was going to church in Sacramento, California, the LDS church now.
Yeah.
And I was learning about the church. And he was preparing to leave for overseas.
Now, is this the church that you were going to? Is that the one where Grandpa John had the heart attack
Yeah.
at? And so, at some point, Grandpa John and Grandma Dorothy and Uncle Dan had also become converts to the church
Yeah,
after
but
you?
later, later.
So this was a couple years later after you
Yes.
had moved away from
Yes.
Sacramento.
Yes.
Okay. So Dad, you are stationed down at Camp Pendleton, and then Mom moves down there.
No, I was stationed at
came
Camp
down.
Pendleton, and she was in Sacramento. I got shipped overseas
Uh-huh.
for 16 months. It was supposed to be 13 months, and they extended us because the war started. And I was over there for 16 months. Right at the end of that, she moved, or when I was ready to come home, she moved to Carlsbad.
So when you got at the end of your 16 months, that was the end of your commitment to the Marine Corps?
No.
No.
So why didn't you stay with the war going on? Why would they send you home?
Well,
Your
they
tour
sent
was
me-
done?
Well, because we'd already been overseas for way more than they were allowed. There's
Got
only
it.
a certain amount of time they'll send you overseas. The Marines would send them over for 13 months. Other services would only have 6 months away from their family.
Gotcha.
So we had been over for 16 months. They had to leave us, those that had been over that long, here for at least 4 months. Then they extended everybody in the services for 4 months because the war had started. So that gave me enough time to go back over to Vietnam.
So he went twice, is what we're trying to say.
Gotcha. But the second time was when the war had actually started?
Yeah.
The first time you were just stationed over there where there was no war?
Well, the war
So-
actually started while I was overseas in this first tour, but we were stationed on a ship floating battalion, and we'd been there for 4 months floating off the coast.
Yeah.
And so the war had started when we were over there, but they hadn't injected the troops yet.
So they said you're going home, your tour is up, and you're coming home, or
No.
not your tour, but your
Yeah,
rotation
right,
is up,
right,
whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And you're coming home to what at that point, that first time? You're married, Mom had just moved down to Oceanside and had gotten baptized. That's what you're coming home to.
Right.
And you're going to be the 17-year-old teacher.
Yeah.
At that point,
Right.
that manual arrived to you on a ship somewhere?
Yeah. Well, she shipped it to me before I came home.
How long did it take packages to get there when you'd ship them?
Well, the air didn't take maybe a week.
Oh,
or
the
two.
military delivered stuff pretty
Yeah,
quickly,
but
huh?
I came back on a ship. Took 30 days to come back on a ship.
It took a month to come home, huh?
Right.
So you get here, and Mom had who moved you into your place in Oceanside if you were gone?
My dad,
So they drove you down,
yeah.
moved you into your new place. You moved into a new ward and made some new friends right away, or you?
You know, Adam, that's really unclear to me.
Yeah.
It was a pressured time. I had to go to work for the telephone company, and I had moved down here and changed my employment to the telephone company down here, and I was living in a little motel until I could find a place. I did that all on my own until I could find a place to rent. And then I finally found the place to rent. And then I had a few things, and my dad brought them down to me there
Where was this motel you were staying at? What city?
in
Oceanside,
Oceanside.
close to the base
Yes.
then? And how would you look for a place to rent? Did you look at the newspaper and look
I had a
for?
car. I had the little white, what was that called there? I had a car, and I drove around and I
Plymouth,
just looked for places. Back then I was confident and I could do all those things. Now, you know, I'm
Yeah.
half here, but then I was all the way there, and I just went around looking, and I finally found a place I could afford.
Was there like any support services that the military gave to wives of
There
men?
probably was, but I,
You didn't know about it.
no.
So then you moved into, what was the first connection with the LDS Church in Oceanside?
Well, I moved into the Harding Street duplex
Hmm.
and went to the church that was available there.
And who was the bishop? What ward was it?
Oh, it's Floyd.
Of which
Ron
ward?
was in the state presidency at that time.
This was in Oceanside second ward
Yeah.
area?
It
No,
was-
no, it was in Carlsbad First Ward.
It wasn't. It was the Oceanside.
But you met in the
first-
Oceanside building, whatever
first
ward it
ward.
was. It was on,
California Street.
California Street. And then what happened from there? Did you get a calling and you started going to church regularly?
Yes.
And that's when you talked to the Bishop Packard, and he
Yeah.
said, "Let's get Rick active when he gets back," and everything was good from there.
It's been all uphill since.
So you showed up, and you get off the ship. Did Mom greet you at the ship?
Yep,
How did people come home
No.
off the ship?
you did.
I can't remember.
No, you
him coming
didn't.
home.
We got off the ship and we came to Camp Pendleton.
And you had bunks and barracks there and stuff that you
That's
stayed
where I
in?
picked him up. I drove out to Camp Pendleton. I remember that now. And he was getting off this ship,
Buses.
buses there. And they were sending him in through a thing, because some of the men came home with venereal diseases and others, so they had to go through a kind of a
A medical checkup and all that
yes,
stuff?
Uh-huh. And then after they would come out, one of the saddest things I remember is coming out, was as Rick and I drove off, there's a man screaming inside, "But you can't keep me from my wife, you can't keep me from my wife." And Rick had later told me that he had venereal disease and he could not leave the base.
Gotcha. So then you came home to a whole new house. Mom had gotten an apartment to live in, and you didn't have to live on base at that point. You could go wherever you wanted.
Yeah, we had this little duplex,
On Harding,
on
by the
Harding.
post office, which is, well,
I
what
don't
now,
know
the
about
post office?
But I know it was on Harding Street, that's
Got
all I
it.
can tell you.
I think we've been to that a few
Little
times in
duplex.
Carlsbad, right?
Yes.
So when you chose Carlsbad of all places, what other options did you have? Were you looking at Oceanside and other areas? What made you decide to move to Carlsbad? Just a good place to rent?
Well, yes, but also Oceanside had a lot of Marines around it,
Yeah.
and the streets in Oceanside, I don't know, had that kind of Marine town feeling.
Yeah.
You know, the guides and tattoo parlor and those
Strip
kind of
clubs
things.
and all
No,
that.
it didn't have that, but there was just that feeling of, you know, this is where the guys hang out.
Gotcha.
And I didn't like that feeling. And so those cities are actually connected, Oceanside and Carlsbad.
On Hill
So
Street.
you drive a little bit down and you're finally in Carlsbad. And when I got there, I don't know, it just had a sweet feeling in that town. That's all I can tell you. And I
Yeah.
went, oh, this seems like a nice place to live, not too far from my work. Maybe there's something here. And then somebody told me about from work. Somebody told me about a place that had duplexes.
Where was
And it was
the?
fairly cheap.
Where did you
So I
work?
went to
The
look.
telephone company?
Uh-huh.
Where was that? What city was that in?
Oceanside.
In Oceanside?
Yeah,
Do you remember
right
where?
downtown Oceanside.
Gotcha. On Hill Street?
Actually, wasn't that right there?
It was half a block
It
off
was
of
half
Hill.
a block off of Hill.
Just about Hill and Mission.
Got it.
Right in the area.
So how much rent did you? What was your rent in this place you moved into?
It was $75, wasn't it?
I thought it was $83 a month.
Yeah, it wasn't much.
Wow. And how much was
House.
how much was gas
I don't know.
for your car? This would have been in the late '60s.
I can't remember
Probably
the car bill at
less
all.
than $1 a quarter.
No. Oh,
For a gallon of gas?
I don't know, honey.
I don't know.
I just know I was very careful.
Got it.
Finding the place and, you know, making sure.
So how long did you live in that place?
Until Rick went overseas again.
About 7 months.
And then did you move before Mom
Well,
into another place?
We lived there long enough for her to get pregnant and have an ectopic pregnancy and died
the baby.
and
What's an
she
ectopic
died.
present? What is that?
And they're fallopian tubes.
Uh,
It's called ectopic, and it got in the fallopian tube and attached in the fallopian tube.
instead of going down into
Yes.
the uterine wall.
They
Okay.
tell me that was a
Ruptured.
boy because when I lost tissue, they checked the tissue and it was a boy.
Got it.
And that ruptured, and I had to go to the hospital, and I was in a coma for 2 days. They gave me the surgery, and I was in a coma. And some sad memories there. Anyhow, Rick came there to take care of me, and then he was going to be going overseas again, and so
How far into the 9 months were you when that happened?
3 months.
3 months.
Almost 4 months, and so the exposure was pretty big. I was very sick, very lucky to make it actually, my doctor told me.
So then you came
And
through
by
that.
the way, I healed because of a priesthood blessing. And
Who gave you that?
I don't remember, but I remember that's the reason. Who was out there that visited me
I
then?
don't remember.
Anyhow, and so I made it. And so then Rick was going overseas. He went overseas, and I moved back to Sacramento.
Oh, you did.
Yes.
With her parents.
Got it. Because you were just recovering from this
Yes.
kind of traumatic experience.
Yeah.
What did you? Were you teaching the 17-year-olds during that time when you were home, like the
Mhm.
plan?
Yep.
Do you remember any of who your 17-year-olds were?
Yeah, there was Floyd's, Allison Packard, and you know, I don't remember all of them, but
Yeah.
I remember Allison.
Floyd
Floyd's
Jr., the boy,
Yeah.
and Allison Packard was a good friend. That's his little sister. Only she was just a year younger.
So you're only 19 at the time,
Oh no,
Oh,
I was
no, we're older
21.
now.
21. I was
21, teaching the 17-year-olds.
Yeah.
And do you remember who some of the influential people were in that ward that maybe guided your life at that point? Because you guys are starting out in the
Packard.
church.
It's
All-
the Packards.
The Packards.
All three of the Packards, McDougal. Actually, and then I became, I think, assistant scoutmaster at that time.
I can't remember if you
Just
got a
after,
call.
just before I went overseas, I was assistant scoutmaster, Bud McDougal.
Well, they kind of watched out for him. I think that's the better way of saying it.
Yeah. Did you?
Yes, he was just learning, and
Yeah. Did you drive mom home to Sacramento when she moved back to her mom's? How'd you get there? You drove your car?
Her dad came
my
down
dad
and picked her up
he
again.
got me again.
How'd he come down?
He
Did he
brought
take a train or?
some
No,
kind of
he-
truck to load up my
He brought
stuff.
down his
and-
old Plymouth. And,
Oh, he left your car there, or did you drive
well, I
another
think they
car?
drove it back.
Got it.
He drove back and she drove back the car.
So then you went off again for another rotation?
Well,
11
yeah.
months.
and you were going, and now the war is actually happening at this point.
Yes.
This is 1960.
5.
65.
Yeah.
So had you already gotten sealed at that point before you left?
Yes. When I went overseas, I'd been to the temple. Yes.
So what temple did you go to?
LA.
So you both went through and got your endowments out
Yes.
first?
Yes.
Do you remember what that felt like or what your thoughts were at the time?
Yeah, I just thought it was the most beautiful place.
And this was in the LA temple.
Right.
Yes. It was
And
a
Dad?
very reverent feeling there.
Did what?
What was your feelings at the time of going through the temple for the first time?
I.
Did you fall asleep?
Oh no. No, it was very spiritually tranced, I guess is the best way to describe it.
And then you left, went off to where did your ship take you to first?
Strong impression in the temple that we would have a lot of children. Strong impression.
Well, I'd gotten my patriarchal blessing then too.
Who gave you your patriarchal blessing?
Wilcox.
That was the patriarch at the time?
Right.
And you got one as well, Mom, or did you already have one?
No,
at that
I
point?
got my patriarchal blessing.
I went over on a ship, just a troop transport. We went to
Another
look at-
month?
Huh?
Another month trip to go back to where you were headed?
Yeah. Stopped in Hawaii on the way over. Went to Okinawa and then, yeah, we went over as a division. I'd been in, by that time when I went overseas, there was hardly anybody left in Camp Pendleton. The only people who were left were the people like me that had been overseas so long that they couldn't send them back over. So I went over with division headquarters we went into Okinawa, then we went by ship down to Vietnam, Vietnam.
Did you go to any other spots like Iwo Jima or any
No,
other places?
not that time. The
Not
first
that
time we was over, I went to the Philippines, went to Korea, Japan.
Did you get to get off the ship and go see some of those
Yeah, well,
countries?
Yeah.
So you've been.
We were stationed in Japan for 4 months, right
Gotcha.
at the base camp of Camp Fuji. And we got off the ship in the Philippines, probably, we were there for a couple of weeks.
What was your duties? What did your duties consist of?
What?
What was your duty? What did your duties consist of?
I was a teletype crypto operator. Basically, we ran the message center that received all the messages that came in for the division and transferred them, or sent messages. Just, we were responsible to send messages and receive them.
So you sat at some sort of computer device?
Desk
Kind of
with a typewriter.
basically.
And they'd come in over a radio signal. You'd hear a voice and you'd transcribe it.
It's the best way to describe it. It's like a fax sound. Comes over on the radio, sounding similar to that.
And it comes out of a little strip of paper, or actually on
Yes.
on a typewriter,
Yes.
on an 8.5
It
sheet by
typically
11.
came out on that strip of paper,
Uh-huh.
and then you would run that through a machine that would print it out.
Gotcha.
So did
So-
you get any good information during your time?
Oh yeah, we got basically troop movements and stuff like that. We knew when people were going to be transferred, and
So then how would you transfer that information to whoever it was supposed to go to?
you would type a tape.
And then you'd
type
hand
on
it to
a
somebody?
typewriter, and then you'd send it out over the electronic to wherever it was going to go.
Oh, gotcha.
But you never witnessed a lot of violence.
No.
So this is 19, your next trip was 11 months and it ended when?
Well, they extended me for 4 months. I went overseas and served 3 years, 1 month, 9 days. I served a little less than 4 months of the extension, got a school early cut to go back to college, so I came back. By that time, she'd found a little house in Oak Grove.
Oh, he had also made it to candidate school, officers candidate school, and he got that also, just before he came home.
Well, that actually happened while I was in Camp Finland. Before I went over, the communications officer had submitted my papers to go to OCS. In the process of the whole division moving out of there, those papers got lost, and they never went through. And I was worried to the day that I got out that they would, because by the time I went to Vietnam, I didn't want to stay in the Marine Corps,
Gotcha.
even as an officer. So by the time I was ready to get out of the Marine Corps, I was worried that those papers were going to be found, because I'd signed the papers to re-up for 4 years. And they never found them, and they released me.
So you might still owe them 4 years if they found them today.
No.
We might
I
have
don't
to
think
we
they'd
might
take
have to
them.
send you back.
After I got out, I still had, you had 6 years that you had responsibility. When they were drafted, you had a commitment to serve the military for 6 years. So I was inactive Marine Corps for 3 years after I got back, but nobody ever even contacted me ever.
Got it.
Anything.
Well, the war wrapped up a few years later, and
No, not a few years later.
well, the early 70s, right?
It's 78, something
Yeah.
like that. That was,
Okay.
probably 10, 15 years later.
Oh, so you were nervous then?
No, once I got released from the inactive reserves, I wasn't nervous.
I meant while you were still inactive.
I didn't really give it a lot of thought.
Got it. If it happened, it happened.
Could have happened.
So that 11-month ended when? What year? What?
66, I came home in 66.
And
Just
so-
in time to go to college, which would have been June.
And where was that?
Sacramento, went back to Sacramento City College.
And what was your plan?
My plan was to be a coach. But when I went to college, the first time I took non-transferable subjects. So I had to go back and retake English and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And I went back I had been there for less than a year. And then I got the opportunity to apply for the Highway Patrol, and that's when I got onto the Highway Patrol.
And that was in Sacramento?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well,
Yes.
I went to the academy in Sacramento, and I got transferred to Anaheim on my first duty station. Then I got transferred to Oceanside.
How long was your first duty station in Anaheim?
About a year. little.
And where did you guys live while you were in Anaheim?
Leora Street, just about 7 blocks west of Disneyland.
But
In
before
Anaheim?
Yeah.
I never knew you lived in Anaheim.
We did.
Huh.
In an apartment, upstairs apartment, and I worked basically graveyards the whole time I was there, and she had to put tinfoil on the windows to keep the sun out so I could sleep during the day. It was tough on her having a new baby, and
So Eric was born
Eric
Yes.
was born while I was
during
in-
this year in Anaheim? Eric was
Yeah.
born, or
No.
Eric was born in Sacramento before you
Yes.
came to Anaheim?
At the end of our time in Sacramento, as Dad was finishing up the academy.
Well, I
and
was in
stuff.
the academy,
Yeah.
We were
I
living
got
on a
Sharon,
row,
and she was
row road
pregnant.
in Elk Grove.
and she was pregnant. She stayed home. I went to my first duty station in Anaheim. While I was there, she had had Eric in Sacramento.
Got it.
But by that time, I had got the apartment. And then when she was done, then we moved her and Eric down with me.
So Eric was born August 5th, 1967,
Uh-huh.
correct?
Yes.
What was that first childbirth like?
I got the notice that she was going to the hospital. I got an airplane ticket, got to the airport, and that took quite some time to
From where? Where were
from
you?
Anaheim to LA
Oh, okay.
airport. And then I flew up there. By the time I got there, she was still in labor.
I had been in labor, I was in labor 36 hours with Eric.
Wow.
Seal.
And
That's me.
Mhm.
Every time.
I was already 2 weeks late on his delivery. So, and by now, they're telling us the baby weighs 9 pounds, they think. And he's a big baby, and I'm a little girl. I weigh about 100 pounds until I got pregnant with him, and then
Well,
I gained 43 pounds while I was
well,
pregnant.
they were. I was fit to be tied because I'd been there and she'd been in labor and it was in trouble. They ended up taking a C-section.
After 36 hours.
Yeah.
Why did they wait so long?
That's my question. I never did understand that.
Yeah.
Of course, I was a new dad and had no idea, but I still don't understand why they would wait that long, unless they were waiting for me. But I don't think they were.
Do you remember who the doctor was that was your OBGYN?
Yeah, I do, but I
back then?
don't remember the name.
He wasn't the same one that delivered the rest of your children
No,
in Tri-City.
was not Dr. White, or
Dr.
probably
White.
wouldn't have gone
Yeah.
on for 36
Yeah, that's what
hours.
I'm thinking. So then you moved to Anaheim. Eric's a healthy boy. You're healthy, pretty quick
Yeah.
recovery from that. You're in Anaheim now for a year. Any highlights while you're in Anaheim?
We got to see Disneyland a lot.
I bet.
Daddy worked for the patrol, and they had special passes that you could get reduced rates.
At Christmas
so-
time, that was when was he born? August. So we were there in Christmas of '67. Disneyland brought 2 huge boxes of what they called E-ride tickets.
Yeah, I remember that.
And we could just take as many as we wanted. But we also got in free by just showing them our badge. So once we get in, we had all these tickets. And
But
so
you got an infant. How many rides are you going to go on with an infant?
Well, we went on a lot.
Yeah,
But they
I can't
also,
remember that
Knoxbury
at all.
Farm also brought cases and cases of their jellies and stuff in there and set them on the,
in there, meaning at the
For the
Highway Patrol
day.
station in Anaheim?
Right.
Oh, you had a day at the park.
Yeah,
Got it.
Huh?
Oh, you're saying they brought him to the station.
they brought the tickets and the jelly to the briefing table, which is a huge
yeah,
table.
that's what I meant.
Got it.
And then you just take whatever you want to.
Cool.
And he didn't bring, I think he only brought 2 things of jelly home, and I think he only brought 6 tickets home. You're very conscious of not taking more than your share. He always was very conscious.
But they also,
But
we
we had a
also
good
had
time.
tickets to go to Knoxbury Farm.
So then
So
a
we
year,
enjoyed our time in Anaheim.
and then a year later, are you glad to be leaving
But the
Anaheim?
church is real bad in Anaheim.
Yeah.
Real bad in Anaheim. I don't mean the church, I just meant that the ward was very non-warm, and we had a real hard time there. We were just young people in the church, and there was no young marrieds group or anything like
We
that.
were
So
just
yeah,
reading what my call was. No, your call. They didn't call me to anything, and they called you to
be the drama director.
drama director.
And so it just was real hard there. Whatever a drama director is, I
And
don't
we
know.
were used to.
I just know I had
The
to work
road
on
show.
Road show, yeah.
We were used to the Carlsbad love.
Yeah.
You got none of that there.
So then a year later,
Moved down.
are you asking for a transfer?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You're just
Because
waiting for the next.
By then, I'd already known when I got on the highway patrol, I knew that's where I wanted to go, because that's where we had our experiences that were happy.
Got it. So now you're just waiting for the right time and opportunity to get
Well,
transferred down.
immediately when I got there, I applied to be transferred, and it took that long to get transferred.
Gotcha. So a year later, you get the notice. Who told you, and were you pretty excited? We're going to Oceanside?
Yeah, we were really excited, yeah.
I don't remember how I got the notice, I really don't.
So then you're headed down there. You find an apartment
Yeah, then
That's when we
found
found
a
the
little
house
on
on
Roosevelt,
Roosevelt Street, $90 a month.
Right by Chase.
over by
Police
Chase
office.
Field. Yeah. And now you're in the highway patrol, stationed out of Oceanside. What was your shifts like?
Well, they varied there, and when I was in Anaheim, basically the seniority, so you got all the crappy shifts. In Oceanside, they rotated. They had a rotation system, so you wouldn't always have the crummy shift.
It seemed like to me it was a 2-month thing. You would do days 2 months, and afternoons 2 months.
In Oceanside?
Uh-huh,
Well,
and then
no,
evenings 2 months.
they rotated it, but there's some people that wanted to stay on certain shifts.
So
So
you could
they had some
swap.
guys that liked graveyard, so you could get, if they didn't want it, you had a chance of, if you didn't want graveyard at all, you had a chance of swapping with other people.
Gotcha.
But basically, it was like she was saying, it rotated I think about every 2 months. But you didn't, just because they rotated doesn't mean that you would change shifts.
So were you able to give up most of your graveyard shifts to somebody that wanted them, or did you have to do some?
Well, actually, when in Oceanside, I liked the graveyard shift, or not the graveyard, but they called it the drunk shift, 7 at night to 2 or 3 in the morning. Because it would allow me, by then I had got a second job in construction. So it allowed me to work all day in construction and all night on graveyard. So I did that for about 3 or 4 years. So I worked a lot of the drunk shifts.
How much? What was your pay as a highway patrolman?
Seemed like it was about $1,400 a month, wasn't it? I
No,
think
it
it was
wasn't
about
very
that.
much.
So, like less than 20 a year. That's 12
1400
plus
would be
6,
more than
18,
20.
about 18,000 a
Yeah.
year
Yeah.
as a highway patrolman.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, police work and fire department is not necessarily, and school teachers isn't that, you don't make.
No, I get it. I'm just trying to get a frame of reference
In
of
the
how
first
much
few years.
you were making, and then you were doing construction during the day, and you'd sleep from 2 in the morning until.
Well, I worked, I got time off on the weekends in construction, and I got time off in the week from the highway patrol. So I would have 4 days out of the 7 that I wasn't working 2 jobs.
Gotcha.
So,
But he didn't sleep much on those nights when there was doubles. I'd say on those nights he probably would get 3 hours of sleep.
Where were you working construction? What company or who were you
I
working
was
for?
building bridges and all those bridges through Carlsbad.
Off of the I-5?
Yeah, where they widened the bridges.
Got it. And when did you work on the Rainbow Bridge over on the 15?
That was after I quit the highway patrol. I was working for another bridge company. I went down there.
Gotcha.
Their battery's dying.
And we got a few more minutes. We're okay. So this is 1969 now or 8?
That I went
that
there?
you moved down to Roosevelt Street from Anaheim. 69. And Eric's 2 years old. Are you guys trying to have any more children at that point?
We tried to adopt because we tried to have children, we couldn't.
So you're thinking at that time
We went out and
you're
adopted.
done? What you already had a
Yeah,
kid?
well, we weren't able to get pregnant. We went to doctors, we went to specialists, and
We did all the things like people do, take temperatures, watch a chart, do all the things. It just got to be sickening because between that and your dad's work hours, we didn't even know when to talk, much less to do anything else. So it was very hard, and there was no way. We just couldn't seem to get pregnant. But at this time, we started talking about adoption, and we just loved kids. Dad and I loved children. But we had a hard thing happen. We did eventually take in a child. We actually had an adoptive son. His name was
Now,
Carl.
was this a
by
foster?
his birth
Was this a
parents.
foster
No,
child, or
this
you
was
actually adopted?
baby
Yeah, we
adopted.
went to
a
the
Hang
baby.
on a
County,
sec. Tell me
yes.
about what the adoption process was like. Did you
It
have
was
to pay
very
for it?
thorough. We had to pay for it.
How much?
It seems to me that because it was done through the county, the fees were very minimal. But we did have to pay some fees. Seems to me like it was $800 altogether, which was quite a bit of money for us.
Mm-hmm.
But we did adopt a son. He was called Carl by his birth parents, and we renamed him Aaron, Aaron. And we had him for quite a while, but they had not told us that he was a drug baby from his parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had so many problems. We couldn't get him to eat right. He cried all the time, and I mean all the time. And it was very hard on me. I was not emotionally equipped then to handle him.
Well,
It was not his fault,
county
it was my
also,
fault.
when you adopt, the county also has visits into your home to see how things are going. After about the third visit, they said, this is not working. This
I
baby's
just
not
was
gonna
worn out.
come out of this, so they took the baby back.
No, the baby, they said, needed to go to a doctor's home. So the next family that could adopt him needed to be a doctor or a nurse.
Gotcha.
But in the meantime, she got pregnant.
But the sad part is the day
That's
that they
you.
came to get the baby, and I was so beside myself
How
because
old
I
was he?
felt I had failed him.
Yeah.
8 months old, no, 6 months.
And you had him as a newborn.
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
3 days old. And my heart is wrenching because I hate myself so much for not being able to take care of him in the right way, I thought. Anyhow, I
When
went
was
to
this?
the doctor 4 days later because I was feeling so bad. And Dr. White. And I thought I was going to just talk to him about how sad I was. But he gave me an exam and he told me, Sharon, you're pregnant.
So this is in 1970.
When were you born?
I was born in 71.
Yeah.
So it had to have been somewhere in the fall, late
Yes.
fall. So you adopted him in the early spring, and then he left in the fall.
About,
Had him for 6
about
months.
March or so.
Huh.
And then he was 6 months. How long is that? September or
Yeah.
so?
Yeah.
So after you were born, we couldn't stop.
Yeah. Obviously, your night shift jobs changed, and you guys had more time for making babies.